We have to do something, Haim. We simply just can't wait for Uzushio to come back to us. I don't want to be the suspicious type, but with what the toads told me, we have to be proactive. It will be best to look like we are suspicious people than allowing a disaster to come to us. Do you think Uzu has the might to do anything dangerous? Tsunade asked with concern. Jiraiya shook his head. I don't really know, Haim. I don't know, he said in a firm tone. However, we have to consider that they could be after revenge for what was done to them. We cannot ignore that they were invaded without having provoked any other nation. We must also consider the possibility that they might also turn to us as well. We didn't do anything. What were we supposed to do after their destruction, Jiraiya? I don't know, Haim, Jiraiya said in a bitter tone. But do you know what Naruto said to me? The Toad Sage looked thoughtful for a moment before speaking again. Why is it that even when Uzushio and Konoha were allies that none of the Uzumaki came here to seek refuge after their destruction? Tsunade frowned. This puzzles me. Konoha's shinobi were Uzushio's symbol, Haim. Kushina was brought into this village just to be a Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. The relationship between Konoha and Uzushio was a deep one that was made with strong bonds. And yet when their village was destroyed, none of them came here. Konoha did nothing, but if they had come here, they would have been accepted, and at that time, there was no village that would have dared try to invade us, Jiraiya said in a very serious tone. It is alarming and we really cannot ignore this. What must we do then, Jiraiya? What are we going to do about this? It does look like things are not going to settle any time soon, Tsunade said in an equally serious tone. At this point, she was truly glad that she had managed to get her shinobi to up their training in case something happens. Something looked like it was going to happen very soon. We need answers, Jiraiya said firmly. We need to get them from Uzushio. I will be willing to force my way into the village to get answers. Now thinking about this, we shouldn't have been naive. Just think of the way the village dealt with Iwagakure's spies. They must have known that killing them and sending them back would only invite Iwa's anger, and yet they did it anyway. Tsunade was silent for a couple of moments. She had tried a diplomatic approach and she thought it was working. However, there were bigger concerns. Yet, they had nothing prove their concerns. It was all just speculation. However, with how long they have lived, could they really ignore their instincts? Do you think Uzushio will take kindly to that? It is actually their reaction to how things go when I visit that will determine their standing, Jiraiya said. We cannot overlook anything as things stand. Tsunade nodded her head. I will have to think of something in case there is a fallout, she said in thought. Before she could say anything more, Danzo entered the office. Tsunade groaned loudly at the presence. This was someone she didn't want to see now. What do you want, Danzo? She demanded. Danzo eyed Jiraiya for a moment before nearly frowning. He had this person to deal with, and Sasuke. The Uchiha had just killed one of his agents just like that and in front of him. He would not forgive it. Shisui's eyes could work on the Uchiha. It didn't matter if had the Sharingan or not, but Danzo really didn't want to waste the ability. Sasuke has returned to the village and you still haven't given him to me. Tsunade stared at the man for a moment. I don't think this is going to work, Danzo, she said. We had an agreement. We did? If I remember correctly, I said I would need to think about things once he returns. I'm still thinking and you are not helping yourself. That aside, things were different before we spoke. They have changed once more. Please leave, I am having an important discussion with Jiraiya. Danzo stared at Tsunade with an immovable gaze. Was the woman really just dismissing him like that? He was here because he was concerned. Sasuke now posed a greater risk to everything that he has worked to gain, and he simply could not tell this woman. The Uchiha massacre was a village secret, and even if Tsunade was the Hokage, she didn't have to know. This was still embarrassing though. After everything he has swallowed to work with this woman, she was still going to treat him like this? Right there, he was thinking of using Shisui's eye to manipulate her. It had never occurred to him that she would turn on him like this. What is so important? Danzo was forced to ask in a sharp tone. We had already spoken about this. And it is concerning that we discuss his loyalty given how he returned to the village. There are a couple of things regarding village security and future, but nothing you should concern yourself with. You probably won't live long enough to see it anyway, Tsunade responded with indifference. Danzo ignored the last comment. He was certainly not going to ask about what the woman meant by that. But it was going to be a race to see who would be alive then. It was either going to be her or him. If there is something that concerns village security, I should be made aware. Tsunade stared at the war hawk. Who are you? Jiraiya almost laughed at the question, but he held himself from doing so. He had been worried about how his former teammate was handling the sneaky cripple, but it was apparent that there was no need to worry. She had everything under control. But of course, there were certain things that Jiraiya still had to sort out with her. But that would only come if Danzo does something that warrants his presence. For now, he could only watch. You seem to forget who you are speaking to, Tsunade. I have been serving Konoha for many years now. He was cut off from finishing by Tsunade. And my grandfather founded this village along with the Uchiha. I don't understand what your point is, and I really don't want to understand. Either way, I have already told you to leave, and you should leave before I order my Anbu to help you out, Tsunade said in a stern tone. Danzo stared for a long moment before turning away. He left the office without saying another word. Once he was gone, Jiraiya turned to the blonde Hokage. I didn't know Sasuke came back. In what way did he even come back? Saying this feels a bit weird since he actually ran away from the village. He was speaking as if the Uchiha had just gone for some vacation with Orochimaru. A couple of days ago. He returned just like that. He says he killed both Itachi and Orochimaru. When we asked for Itachi's head, he said it was stolen. And I believe him. He seemed rather incensed about it, Tsunade said with a sigh. He hasn't been doing anything since he returned. I am still working on his cover. I have already drawn up things, I just need to speak to the clan heads once I have completed everything. I'm sure they won't be pleased since the lives of their children had been put at risk chasing after Sasuke, Jiraiya said. Tsunade nodded with a thoughtful look on her face. She then seemed to shrug a bit carelessly. Either way, it's not their call to make the decisions, and I was the one who sent them out on the mission. I hope it goes well, Jiraiya said. I will be in the village for the next days. But when I leave, I'm heading straight to Uzushio-Gakure. We cannot rest without knowing anything about their intentions. Sunagakure. The heart was an uncontrollable thing that Temari often found she wanted to strangle just to kill the emotions it made her feel. There were many things that occurred in this life, but you really could not control the human heart. It was always unpredictable. Sometimes it made you experience things you never thought you would feel. At least now, life wasn't so bad. She was actually happy with how things were progressing in the life and with her relationships. Temari didn't care about fame and everything. Right now, she just wanted to support her brother in his work. With a war looking like it was going to occur, the village has been working hard to train its shinobi. It would have been difficult if they didn't have funding to make it in their journey, but Gaara had managed to get funding from the Wind Daimyo. Suna was able to prepare things smoothly. They were able to stock on the necessities. She was helping Genins train along with other Jonins. It had been almost sad when no one picked her brother to be their sensei. But he had managed to secure himself students which he personally trained. They had been afraid of him at first. Perhaps her brother made things worse by his stoic mask. But they were used to it. They now spoke fondly of him because they spend time with him, they get time to hear him talk and actually listen to him. Most people who actually take the first step of trying to know her brother don't regret it. She was currently busy with her students when a shinobi came to her and told her that she was being requested by the Kazekage. She stopped the training. We can call it for the day. Tomorrow, same time, she said to her students. We will stay around here for a little while longer. Temari didn't say anything to reject the idea. They always did that every now and then. She didn't always have time to give them her full attention, but whenever she could, she would always see them. The blonde left her students after telling them not to take it too rough. She slowly walked towards the Kazekage Tower. It was busy with people coming in and out, up and down, shinobi coming in for their mission request. It hadn't always been like this, but with time, things do change. Gaara was the Kazekage, and although some still didn't accept it, they had wrapped their hands around the idea that he was the cage and would not be going anywhere. When she arrived in the office, he was just dismissing someone. She settled down calmly and watched for a moment. Is there something wrong? Gaara looked at his sister for a moment before looking at the letter he had received from Tsunade. Naruto had returned to the Leaf. He had always known that the blonde was returning, but she had sent a message to confirm that he had indeed returned. Temari didn't know about it. But he had observed that she had grown quite close to him during his time in this village. She even spoke of him very fondly. He didn't know much about the matters of the heart, but Gaara wasn't against his sister growing closer to Naruto. If there was going to be a relationship, he would approve of it. Then again, he had to find someone to marry his sister before the Vultures and the Wind Capital make their move. Either way, he would not be pushing his sister to marry someone she didn't want to marry. Tsunade seemed to think that if the two were given a chance, something could happen since they have already connected. He knew his sister had spent time with that person. He didn't complain. She came back happy every day after spending time with him. Gaara shook his head, clearing his thoughts. Nothing is wrong, he said. But I need to send you to Konoha. You can leave tomorrow morning, he said. What is it? There is a scroll that must be delivered to the Hidden Leaf. The god Im Hokage will also give you something before you return, Gaara said calmly. He praised himself for playing this well. He hadn't thought he would, but he was doing it. Is it about the war that might not happen? Tamari asked. She wasn't pleased at the idea of a war, but if it happened, they would have to fight. Not only because they would have to offer support to the Hidden Leaf but for their own protection as well. There was no way that those villages would leave them alone if Konoha was plundered. Gaara nodded, but it was a lie. The scroll was empty, but he knew Tamari would never open it. We are trading intelligence. Our village is small and unlike the others, but we are still a great nation. If there is going to be war, we will have to play our part. Kiri doesn't look like it is going to take part in anything anyway. But at least both Iwagakure and Kumo are not doing anything as things stand. If they don't do anything, we can breathe, Tamari said. Hopefully nothing happens. But when dealing with power-hungry people, you can never be too sure about anything. Yes, and we still don't know much about Uzushio Gakure, Gaara said with a shake of his head. Come back tomorrow morning for the scroll. I'm sure you need to make preparations on this side since you have a team to handle. Tamari was immediately on her feet. If I hurry up now, I will probably find them, she said that and walked away. Once she was out of the office, Gaara let out a long breath. He played that well. Now he would just have to wait and see what happens in the Hidden Leaf. Tsunade had already said Naruto would not be going anywhere, so there was no way she was going to miss him. Konoha. The Hidden Leaf once more. Tamari was finding the journey to be a bit constant these days. She was the one her village sent over here when there was something that needed to be discussed. Her usual partner in crime wasn't there to greet her today, and so she had entered the village alone and went straight to the Hokage Tower. Once there, she found the blonde Hokage with her assistant. The woman smiled happily seeing her. You arrived sooner than expected, Tsunade said to Tamari. I was a bit faster getting here. I want to get back home as soon as possible, Tamari responded as she handed the scroll Gaara had given her to the god Im Hokage. She didn't sit down but remained standing, waiting to hear what the woman had to say. Gaara didn't tell her anything, Tsunade realized. He hadn't told her that Naruto was back in the village and that she was simply being sent to see him to see if something would click as it did before. She smiled. Perhaps it was better that way. I won't keep you for long. You can leave any time you want, but there is someone who I think you'd want to see before leaving. Tamari was curious. Who? Naruto. Tamari stared at the god Im Hokage for a long moment. Naruto was back in the village? Tamari was surprised. She wasn't expecting this to happen. She certainly thought he had yet to return. Gaara hadn't said anything, but surely he knew that Naruto had returned and certainly kept it from her. Was this some ploy to get her to meet the blonde? It was something else though. She could question, but she was a little excited that Naruto was back. She would nevertheless demand answers from Gaara when she goes back. When did he return? About 2 weeks ago, Tsunade said. He is currently at his apartment. I can get someone to show you. Tamari smiled. That is fine, she said. There was a sign of danger, a demon inside. It was a horrible. Tamari felt sick seeing the sign. Someone had obviously put it there. These people had no shame, didn't they? She felt like ripping it off in anger, but she did not. It was a huge struggle, but she managed to rein on her emotions. Sickened and mad as she was, she managed to calm her feelings. It was still a cruel joke though. How do you put something like this on someone's door? Did Naruto see this thing every day when he opens and closes the door? What was he feeling? What did he think about this? Tamari couldn't put herself in his shoes. She could not. She steeled herself and chose to knock on the side of the door where the sign did not touch. She knocked twice, there was no immediate answer. But Tsunade had told her that Naruto was home. He was in this hellhole of an apartment. How do you even put the son of the man who you hail as your greatest Hokage in a place like this? Tamari shook her head. She was allowing her emotions to run wild. But it just could not be helped. She could understand things with Gaara. But not with Naruto. He had looked so lively when he visited the sand. He was a happy person. But it was no wonder he never talked about Konoha unless you brought it up. Even if the outside world was filled with strangers, he must have felt that it was better than being in a place like this. When the door slowly opened, Tamari's heart skipped a beat. She had known she was coming to see Naruto. But it has been months of complex emotions and troubling questions. But now that she was standing here on his door, slowly opening, she felt unsure. When the door fully opened, He was standing there with a blank look on his face. Upon recognizing her, it slowly changed into a smile. Tamari had counted the seconds that went by when his smile took place. "Hey!" Tamari greeted a bit awkwardly. Naruto tilted his head to the side, still smiling. He was honestly surprised to see her here. This was his den. He wasn't even expecting to see her in Konoha during his short stay. But she was here and he couldn't disappear into thin air. It was perhaps either Tsunade or Gaara who made it possible for her to make the trip to the village, a setup with some political intentions that neither would openly admit even when asked. "Tamari," Naruto said. "That awkwardness. This isn't the first time you're seeing me. I am not like a lover you finally found after years of searching." He paused. "Or am I?" Tamari smiled. She was now at ease. Just those simple words from him and her heart was beating calmly. She missed this kind of person. "In your dreams," she said a bit sharply. Naruto put on a hurt look. "Now that is sad," he said with disappointment. "I was thinking that perhaps when you heard I'd returned, you ran all the way just to see dear ol' me." He finished with a wide smile. Tamari snorted. "Yeah, right," she said. "But at least it would show I didn't forget about you. You certainly seem to have forgotten." "How could I?" Naruto said, shaking his head. "There have just been issues to handle. I have got limited time." There was a bit of seriousness in his tone. It was curious. It made Tamari pause just to study his expression. But she got nothing and so she brushed her thoughts to the side. "Are you going to let me in?" she asked. Naruto blinked. "I forgot. I don't get visitors," he said, stepping out of the way for Tamari to enter. "You must close your eyes, it is rather messy inside." "I doubt that," Tamari said. She didn't move deeper as she waited to hear the sound of the door closing. Naruto walked up to her and led her to the neat sitting room. She looked around. He said it was messy, but it was not. The place was well kept. It was small, but still nice. The door to the bedroom was slightly open, her eyes narrowed as she tried to peek inside. "I can give you a tour if you like," Naruto said with a smile, seeing Tamari's eyes. Realizing she'd been caught getting too curious, Tamari shut her thoughts for a moment before responding. "No, thanks," she said. "So, this is your place." She simply said that because she didn't know what else to say to him. She had thought she would have many things to say after he abandoned her, but now that he was before her, she really didn't know what she could say to him. Naruto nodded his head but didn't say anything. Not until he was done studying the blonde. "This is my place. Want to move in with me? As you can see, I live alone. It can get rather lonely here," he said with a smile, arms open wide, inviting the woman. "It feels like you are inviting me to your arms," Tamari said. She still smiled slightly. "That sign on the door." She really couldn't get it off her head. "Oh, that danger sign," Naruto responded in thought. "It was put when I was 5, I think. For as long as I have lived in here, it has always been there. I never really bothered taking it out. Perhaps I keep it for sentimental value. It reminds me of where I come from. Things like that." Tamari smiled sadly. "You really had it rough, huh?" she said. "Would you have a problem sharing it with me? Your past, I mean." The following day, Naruto was strolling through the Hokage Tower, hands inside his pockets. The fifth Hokage wanted to see him. He could make a few guesses on why she wanted to see him, but he wasn't going to think too hard about it. Nothing much of what was going to happen while he was in the Hidden Leaf would have much of relevance anyway. But being carless wouldn't win him any awards and would certainly make the coming days a bit difficult. He wasn't doing anything, life was at ease. He was content with this as it gave him much time to plan things ahead of time. He could also fool around, perhaps now that the situation allowed him to do so. Nevertheless, nothing stupid had to be done. He didn't want to risk things. Sasuke's return in the village was unexpected, but it really didn't change anything. But he was a bit concerned by what Danzo would be doing. He had to keep an eye on things before the man does troubling things. Naruto certainly didn't want a situation where he had to fight the War Hawk. He didn't want any trouble with anyone. If things remained the way they are now, he wouldn't complain about anything. He would die with a blast and a huge smile on his lips. Naruto's footsteps came to a halt when he saw someone coming along the way. He smiled at the woman, Konoha's Genjutsu master, Kurenai Yuhi, a rather delightful woman with mesmerizing eyes. Maybe Jiraiya was right when he said that he liked older women. Either way, what was beautiful could not be ignored. Perhaps the maturity of the older generation was what attracted him. The younger ones were certainly immature at times. But he had big dreams that not even Konoha could contain. He shook his head slightly as his eyes stared at the woman with life in them. Kurenai-sensei, he started a bit happily, a charming smile on his lips. That smile, it wasn't a normal smile. It wasn't smile that he gave everyone. Kurenai didn't need to ask. She didn't need to guess anything. Her instincts told her as much. But she couldn't help but smile in return. There wasn't much difference from the boy she had seen months ago at Tanzaku. Naruto, she said. There was nothing else to say, she wasn't familiar with him. You have a unique frame that really compels one's eyes to stare at you, Naruto said in a quiet tone. You should have been my sensei. Perhaps it isn't too late. You could teach me a couple of things. The words slipped out smoothly. Kurenai blinked. She was caught off guard by his words. She was certainly not expecting him to say something like that. He hadn't said much last time around but just smiled at her. He wasn't looking at her like a pervert. Those were the eyes that just admired her. If there was a hint of perverted thoughts, she would have smacked him. She had no time to waste for perverted brats. He wasn't much of a brat, was he? He was all grown, a handsome young man, and he had a beautiful smile. Perhaps Anko wasn't exaggerating when she said he was a charming young man. Thank you, she said. I don't think there is anything I can teach you. You did train under a Sannin and one of Konoha's finest shinobi. Naruto tilted his head to the side and raised his index finger before wagging it slowly in front of his face. There are some things that not even Jiraiya can teach. Only you can do it better, he said. What? Kurenai's response came a bit quickly than she would have liked. Naruto just smiled. Genjutsu, he said. I hear you used to rival even a famed genjutsu user such as Itachi. No one matches your skills in genjutsu in this village, no? I have traveled to many lands, been to almost all of the great nations, and I haven't come across anyone who is said to be a better genjutsu user than you. So, yes, in that department, you are better than Jiraiya and you can teach me. Kurenai looked thoughtful for a moment. None of her students really knew her skills to be able to use them. She hadn't been thinking of training anyone in genjutsu. Genjutsu is really difficult and only those with high levels of concentration and perfect chakra. The finger that had been moving in front of Naruto's face was on her lips. Kurenai took a step back. Naruto looked amused for a moment but held up both his hands. If I make time, you can tell me all that in a training ground, Kurenai-sensei, he said before walking past the genjutsu mistress. Kurenai twirled around to stare at the blonde with a blank expression on her face. What had just happened, she wondered. Naruto shook his head after walking past the genjutsu mistress. He wasn't going to actually go to her to train. Perhaps if he had time in the village, then he would learn from her just to get closer to her. He really shouldn't be doing this when Temari was in the village though. She was going to smack her fan on his forehead if she found out he behaved in the same way he did when he was with other people. Well, it was no matter. Tsunade wasn't alone in the office, she had the delightful Shizune with her. Naruto smiled towards the woman before turning to the god I'm Hokage. You wish to see me, Buchan, he said before making himself comfortable on the chair in front of the god Im's desk. Tsunade stared for a moment before shaking her head. She wanted to be mad at him calling her an old hag, but there were more important matters to deal with than that. Jiraiya wouldn't be leaving soon, so they had things to discuss before he even leaves the village. Naruto would have to take a role as another Uzumaki who was very much in the picture. We have to discuss important things. I understand you didn't want to do anything with regards to Uzushio, but we don't have that luxury anymore. Naruto raised an eyebrow. There was definitely something that happened. Last time the Uzushio issue had been resolved. Perhaps not forming any ideas when he came here had been a good idea. This way, he was expecting anything and he didn't show his surprise. If she was saying that he no longer had the luxury to decide against stepping into the fray, it just meant that she was going to force him to do things he didn't want to do. Jiraiya must have returned with a worrying message from Amigakur. He knew the perverted Sannin had returned to the village but hadn't bothered trying to seek him out. If something had indeed happened in Amigakur that has made these people worried, it would naturally complicate things. But it was best since he was on the side. He could do damage control. He was very much curious about what had brought this change though. He wanted to know what Jiraiya came back from Ame with. Sasuke had nothing to do with this. Yes, the Uchiha was irrelevant in the picture. What is that supposed to mean? Naruto asked carefully. He managed to sound a little indifferent as he spoke. I was certain that we had already resolved this issue, he said. Tsunade nodded her head. We had, but Jiraiya came back with troubling information. We can no longer ignore whatever it is that your clan is planning to do. We have to know. If there is trouble brewing, we have to be ready for it. If they want to start another war, we will have to try to talk them out of it. But it doesn't appear that they will listen to us. You are one of them, you should be able to get through to them. What makes you think that my words would have much power to do anything? Tsunade shrugged a bit carelessly. Like I said, you are one of them. This is another approach that we are trying. We don't want to forceful about things, but we want to know everything. Jiraiya thinks that Ame and Uzushio are connected, and he is concerned about Nagato's actions as well as the former village's intentions, which have remained curious even now. If they refuse to even tell you anything, Jiraiya can use any means. Naruto was silent, thinking. Ah, so things have come to this. Well, it was to be expected of Jiraiya to have thought this much. Perhaps it was the prophecy from the toads that made him conclude that Amigakure and Uzushio were connected. There was still no proof of it, however. If the Toad Sage ends up forcing things with the whirlpools, it was going to be a bit troublesome. There would have to be something prepared for that case. So you are concerned about Uzushio's intentions, Naruto said calmly. Well, that is to be expected. He finished in thought. Tsunade stared at Naruto with a hardened gaze. She studied his body language and expression to see if she could get something. There was nothing. She couldn't even guess what was on his mind. She couldn't tell if he was wearing a mask or not. He was just there before her, completely looking like he had no thoughts inside of his head. It was frustrating and frightening. I'm saying that if things end up going in another direction, you won't be allowed to fight for your clan, Naruto. I know I had said that if your clan is attacked, I would allow you to defend them even if Konoha wouldn't be able to do anything. However, things have changed. If Uzushio provokes a reaction from any other great nation, you can't do anything. Konoha will not lose you either. The message was very clear to Naruto. They wouldn't allow him to leave, even if he was quitting being a shinobi of Konoha. They would be willing to tie him down just to ensure that he didn't go anywhere. Troublesome people. But he had known that Konoha would never let go of Uzumaki Naruto, not the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. He had accounted for everything. Well, I am still a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf, I must do as ordered. Tsunade frowned deeply. She hated the indifference in his tone. She hated his lack of emotion in her words. He was supposed to be mad, but he was not. Perhaps he was, she just couldn't tell. His expression hadn't even changed much after she told him the hard truth. The only thing that came was a thoughtful look and then the indifference. This is a serious matter, Naruto. I want to know, do you love your clan? Of course I do, Naruto responded calmly. Uzumaki was the only thing I had when growing up. People from this village called me the Kyuubi brat and everything else that made me look like a demon. Uzumaki gave me an identity. I was able to escape the miserable existence that I had been forced to live in this village because the old man told me about the clan and my mother. So without a shred of doubt, I do love my clan. Then why are you still here, Naruto? Why have you not gone to Uzushio-gakure? Why have you not expressed any desire to leave the village to join your home? Tsunade demanded from Naruto in a stern tone. If I had said those words, what do you think would have happened? Naruto asked in a calm tone. You would have never allowed me to leave for the training trip. I would have a squad of Onbu watching over me day and night. I really can't have that, Tsunade-sama. It is already frustrating that I had people watching me when I was younger. I don't need the look of suspicion to having my every movement analyzed and questioned. Tsunade stared at him. She was happy he had finally said it. He had admitted he did love his clan. So, now there was a clear motive. If you had to choose between Konoha and the Whirlpools, what would you choose? That is a tricky question and no answer will satisfy you, Naruto responded with a shrug. If I tell you that I would choose Konoha, you'd question things and always look at me with suspicion because perhaps it wouldn't make sense. If I choose Uzushio, you are never going to allow me to leave this village, even for a mission. Even as things are now, you can't leave the village, Tsunade said in a hardened tone. There will always be suspicion, but I still need you to answer my question. I refuse to answer trick questions, Naruto said calmly. You have all the answers you need. My words mean nothing. Tsunade shook her head. I care for you, Naruto. I want your word, because I want to trust you. It is important that you tell me your thoughts regarding this matter. My thoughts are irrelevant and whether you care for me or not really doesn't matter. If it comes down to it, when you have to choose, this village you lead will always take the first position. That is your duty as Hokage. It might sound cold, but it is the truth and I have accepted it, Naruto said. I told you I love my clan, but if Uzushio attracts trouble, Konoha will not help and I will not be allowed to do anything. I have heard you. I don't need to comment. Silence greeted his words. The Slug Princess was silent for a long minute. She wondered if she had done things correctly. Perhaps not, but she still had to do what was best for both Naruto and Konoha. Uzu didn't come into factor when dealing with these things. I really hope you don't come to hate me for this, Naruto, Tsunade said in a quiet tone. There is really nothing for you to worry about, Naruto said with a wave of his right hand. Tsunade shook her head. She had a sad smile on her lips. When we first discussed this, I was trying to remain hopeful, thinking that perhaps Uzushio didn't have bad intentions. But if they do, we can't associate ourselves with them, she sighed, and kept her sad smile. I really hope you understand my position, she said. Naruto nodded his head. I understand, he said. Tsunade welcomed those words, but she still wanted him to say some angry words. Now that she thought about it, had she ever seen him angry? He was always calm through anything. His mask never faltered and he never gave anything away. She frowned at those thoughts. She shook her head and thought of something else. There was nothing. That is all I wanted to talk to you about, she said. About 2 hours later. Sasuke was surrounded by a handful of corpses from Danzo's Ni forces. He had waited until Danzo was gone from the hideout before sneaking into the place to set the alarm. They were weak shinobi who couldn't do much to him. He had cut through them without wasting time. The power of the Mangekyo Sharingan was just something else. He was enjoying using the eyes that his brother allowed him to gain. This was the kind of power that snakes like Orochimaru thought they could gain for themselves. Pitiful, and they were not even Uchiha. He was currently waiting for Danzo, knowing that the War Hawk would make an appearance any time soon. He had let one slip past him to call forth the master. He wanted to show Danzo that he wasn't afraid of him. He wouldn't do anything quickly. He would allow things to go smoothly and enough to force Danzo to make a hasty decision that would leave him in a troublesome situation. If Danzo attempted to attack him, Sasuke wouldn't mind turning his weapons towards the War Hawk. Anything troubling would likely cause the attention of the village's Anbu to turn to this place. Sasuke wasn't afraid of it. Sasuke activated the ribcage part of his Susanoo as he sensed Danzo's presence behind him. He turned around to face the cripple with a cold look on his face. I have been waiting for you, Danzo. Danzo was incensed, he was furious, he wanted to snap the neck of the Uchiha at this moment. This was unacceptable. He could not accept this. Many of his forces were down. Judging from the numbers, the Uchiha had cut down nearly 3/4 of his men. It was a disaster. He wouldn't have any men to do his work now. If he had the Kyuubi in his possession, it wouldn't matter, but he didn't have the Kyuubi and Sasuke was killing his people. It was unacceptable. Tsunade was even making things difficult for him on the other side. Nothing was going according to plan. The War Hawk couldn't resist glaring at those cursed eyes. He had already known that Sasuke had the Mangekyo Sharingan. But he didn't want to fight him here. He could win in a fight against Sasuke, but it couldn't be in the village when there was the danger of the battle being discovered by someone else. It would be disastrous if he unlocked his secrets and Tsunade showed up with her Anbu. With Jiraiya even on his case and still in the village, it would certainly be the end of him. Still, he hadn't thought that the Uchiha would go this far though. This was a desperate time. He had to get the Uchiha out of the village and into a corner so that he can do the dirty work himself. If he was successful, he would end up gaining control of the Uchiha using Shisui's eye. You have gone too far, Sasuke, Danzo stated in a cold tone. I dismissed your intentions and didn't think you'd do this, but it is apparent that I was wrong. If you have a problem, you are free to attack me, Danzo. Sasuke responded with his hands held out wide. For a good reason, he was almost certain that the man would not be too keen to fight him, and not because he was thinking that he couldn't defeat him, but because there were other ways he thought he could handle the situation. Danzo frowned. I don't want to end up killing such a valuable asset for Konoha when there is a war that is coming. You could prove to be a decisive matter in the coming battles, Danzo said calmly. Certainly, even if Kumo and Iwagakure attacked Konoha, he would have the Uchiha manipulate all their Jinchuriki with his Sharingan. In return, he would be in possession of 4 Jinchurikis, the Kyuubi excluded. Konoha would destroy both Kumo and Iwa, and he would take their Baijuis and seal them into his own people he could trust. He certainly couldn't keep the Jinchurikis who were under the control of someone else, even if he was in control of that person. But those plans were being threatened. If he had to choose between himself and Sasuke, the Uchiha would have to die. It was very simple. You sound certain that there is a war coming, Sasuke said. Are you planning on making one happen? I don't have to do anything to make a war happen. Uzushio Gakure just has to continue existing and a war will happen. I am quite certain that their plans are not pure either, Danzo responded calmly. You should cease with these actions because they only threaten Konoha's safety. Kumo and Iwa could both be attacking us in the direction Tsunade is taking us. Your shinobi are worthless, Sasuke said with a shrug. They can't win Konoha any battle except for doing treacherous things. I think it is much better for Konoha if we're not alive when there is a war, he said. You have already mentioned this, Danzo said. He looked around. At least the Uchiha wasn't going to attack him. It was good. It would give him the chance to move things in motion. He certainly couldn't allow this brat to do as he pleases while he just watches. Does Tsunade know about this? I'm quite certain she wouldn't be pleased if she knew. Sasuke smirked. What makes you think she doesn't know? He asked calmly. With everything that you have done, do you think she would be happy having you behind her when going to war? There is no guarantee that you wouldn't try to kill her to take the Hokage seat for yourself. And about that, as long as I am in this village, you can continue dreaming about being Hokage, but you won't get it. After saying those words, Sasuke walked towards Danzo. He halted a couple of feet away and watched the war hawk respond. I see, you have thought through things. Sasuke snorted. Did this fool think that he would just attack him without tying loose ends? He wasn't known for being stupid. Perhaps he did allow his emotions to get the best of him, but this was his revenge. He would get it without interruptions and he wouldn't do anything stupid to mess it up. The next time we meet, it shall be your end. You can start preparing for your death. After saying that, the Susanoo dispersed and Sasuke blurred away. Danzo stood motionlessly for a couple of moments while thinking about what to do. He certainly couldn't allow Iwa or Kumo to focus on Konoha now. He wasn't ready for that battle. And as things look now, he would have to make a haste departure from the village. Fu, Danzo called out. Hi, Danzo-sama, the man kneeled before his master. Get me those 2 Iwa people, he ordered sternly. Desperate times calls for desperate measures. He couldn't do things any other way now. Besides, this was the only way he was ever going to get Kumo and Iwagakure to focus on each other rather than have them turn on the leaf. Right away, Danzo-sama, Fu responded before going away. Minutes later, Fu returned with 2 shinobi from Iwagakure. He had already used Shisui's eye on them. He just had to release them to do what they had to do. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to say anything about him. You too will assassinate the Yondaime Reikage. You will rendezvous with someone once you reach the cloud. They will show you the way. Iwagakure needs this to be done quickly. Hi. Lead them out, Fu, Danzo said. We don't want them getting caught. Fu nodded and did as asked. Do you think they will succeed, Danzo-sama? Ino asked. Danzo shook his head. They were weak. They couldn't kill someone as powerful as A, but then again, you didn't need to be all that powerful to assassinate someone. You just had to be perfect in the art and you would get your target man. It doesn't matter if they succeed or not. What we want done is to have Kumo and Iwagakure fighting each other. Naruto clapped his hands together, appearing out of nowhere. Bravo, Danzo, he said with a smile. In this way, Kumo and Iwagakure get to fight it all out while you rest easy and prepare things on your part. It will be difficult for the Reikage to believe anything from Aniki because they are indeed Iwa shinobi. Aniki might deny it, but the fact is that a shinobi would have tried to kill the Reikage. Bravo! Brilliantly done. It is also unlikely that Kumo and Iwa will even fight to fight each other, but trusting each other will also be difficult. After saying that, Naruto turned into a cloud of smoke. Cage Bunshine, Danzo said with a frown. Should we go after him? Ino said. Danzo shook his head. He isn't going to do anything about it. But this simply confirms that he cannot be trusted. It works both ways anyway. If Kumo and Iwa are busy fighting each other, they won't have time to focus on Uzushio. This does clear the way for us to move without interruption. The War Hawk said. Prepare for our departure. Burn everything that needs to be burnt. We will step away from Konoha for a while. Naruto could only shake his head after taking in the memories of his clone. Danzo was truly a crafty old man. He knew what had to be done and what he had to do. It was also filled with the thirst for survival and his fanatical love for Konoha. Naruto would not say anything to anyone. Not even to Tsunade or Jiraiya. Of course, if they knew, they would most likely take action against the War Hawk. They wouldn't openly admit to any of the hidden villages that it was one of their shinobi who plotted the madness. It would only invite Iwa's wrath and Kumo's anger. Certainly, the hidden cloud would take advantage of the situation and make absurd demands. It wouldn't even surprise Naruto if the Reikage demanded that he be given the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki or else he goes to war. Iwa would certainly try to stop that. They wouldn't want the cloud to gain another Jinchuriki. But it was unlikely that the villages would fight. Either way, Konoha would be in a difficult spot if Tsunade admitted to Danzo's plot. Well, that was what you get for keeping a madman like him in your corner. He was always going to do something. Naruto wasn't concerned. It worked well for him after all. Sasuke's boldness in attacking Danzo was a little surprising, but Naruto wasn't going to say anything to the Uchiha. He had played the ignorant part for a bit too long now. Perhaps it was good that the Uchiha had someone to take his anger out on. It might have proved to be something else if he didn't have someone to blame for the Uchiha massacre. Well, Naruto was happy either way. He wouldn't even need to do anything to get the conclusion he likes. He didn't even need to say anything but just watch the play unfold. That was something else. Naruto looked up for a moment. It was still noon, but very soon, the sun would walk away. Time often moved quickly when there was a lot to do. Then again, humans were always fighting about time. The time was limited, so they had to use it wisely. He stood up from the Hokage monument and then jumped down, watching the faces of the past Kages and the present one, all 5 of them. No thought went through his mind until he landed on the ground gracefully and then began to dive into the streets of the Hidden Leaf. The air was still contaminated with the hatred and contempt. Perhaps it was just his mind that was playing tricks on him. He could certainly walk around the village and there would be no one staring at him with contempt. Some tried to ignore his presence while some just watched. Naruto never really bothered to think deeply about it. He didn't like the people who have done nothing but torment him after all. Admittedly, he was now able to walk a bit freely. But he still held past deep within his heart. He had not forgotten and he would not forget. Naruto made his way towards Tamari's hotel room. The blonde was staying for a while, but she would be leaving soon. With everything happening around the village, it was best that she leave soon and with capable shinobi to guard her. Danzo would certainly try to do something to her if he felt that he didn't have much of a choice in the matter. Upon arrival, Naruto knocked at the door and the older blonde opened the door. When she noticed it was him, she smiled and welcomed him into the place. Naruto stepped in silently and waited for Tamari to close the door behind her. When he didn't hear her footsteps after hearing the door close, Naruto turned around to face the woman. She was leaning against the door. He smiled. "Nervous, dear?" he asked. Tamari breathed in and out before meeting Naruto's gaze. He had that small smile of his. He had told her things about his past. His experiences in this village. She felt like she knew him better now. Shaking her head, Tamari responded quietly. "A little," she said. Naruto studied her expression for a moment before responding. "This isn't the first time we are alone together," he said. "Maybe." Tamari shrugged indifferently as she stepped away from the door. She walked past him and went on to settle on the couch. "I wasn't expecting to see you," she said, her eyes watching him carefully as he beside her, directly facing her. Naruto shrugged. "Our time together isn't that bad," he said. "I like it." Tamari smiled. "I didn't think you'd admit that to me," she said. He'd always close the door whenever things tried to get personal. Perhaps she shouldn't be surprised anymore since he had willingly told her of his story, a truly sad story, but what could she do other than smile and hope that things would be well? Well, there was the idea that she could speak to Gaara and try to think of something. She wouldn't think of trying to take him out of Hidden Leaf. Tsunade would certainly be mad at them. He had saved her brother and she really did enjoy his presence. She liked him. And she wanted to do something for him that would make sure that his life was going well. Yet, she really didn't know what she could do. "Why wouldn't I?" Naruto asked. Tamari shook her head, and didn't answer his question. "Do you like it better than those nights in the bar? I'm certain you haven't stopped with those tendencies of yours," she said with a stare. Naruto was amused. "Hey, you don't know how it feels like when you are in that place. Besides, it makes me envious of how other people can be careless, and when I want to get lucky, I always go there," he said with a wink. Tamari shook her head but she still smiled. "I knew you were a pervert. You go there for the ladies," she said. Naruto shook his head. "I already told you I don't," he said. "But even if I do enjoy the atmosphere there, I really would prefer being with you. The peace that comes with being with you is honestly refreshing." Tamari stared at him. "I find that hard to believe," she said in a hardened tone. "You're mad that I just left you that day, isn't it?" Naruto asked. "And I didn't say anything to you afterwards. I didn't even write to you." "Of course I am disappointed," Tamari said. She had still kept that message he wrote for her. She had kept it and would mostly keep it forever. It was her precious message. She treasured it. It had been the only thing tangible she could hold and think of him. Those thoughts were ridiculous. When did things even come to this point? She hadn't thought that her emotions would drive her this much. But it could not be helped. It didn't even help with anyone now that she was thinking that her brother was trying to set her up with this person. It appears that Tsunade was on it as well. Perhaps for the latter it was for political reasons. But for her brother, it was definitely because he believed that Naruto could be good for her. She was honestly going to have a long talk with her brother about this matter. Naruto smiled at her before he shifted his gaze away from her. I was actually trying not to get too close to you. You know, I have my issues, but when the heart is willing, it is willing, you really can't stop it. Tamari was silent. She wasn't expecting those words. Perhaps it was her confusion, but she didn't understand them either. What? Naruto turned towards her. His smile was small, but it was the most warming thing that Tamari had ever seen. It made her heart race and she held her hands together. I really think I like you, he said. Tamari stared at him. Her cheeks were painted by a shade of pink. She was flustered. Her confidence in speaking to him now gone. He just sounded so earnest it touched her. It made her feel warm inside. Who has ever told her such words with such honesty? And has her ever felt so excited and happy? Someone liked her, and it was someone she too liked. But she didn't want to admit it. She couldn't. She didn't have confidence. What happened to all that bravado you had a moment ago when you were glaring me for abandoning you with just a note? Naruto asked in an amused tone. Tamari glared at him and picked up a cushion. She flung it towards him. Well, forgive me for not being like you, she exclaimed, her hands folded across her bust. Naruto laughed. You should get used to it already, he said. Perhaps this would come back to bite Tamari more than it would to him. But Naruto truly hoped that she would understand. He hoped that she would not be hurt. He didn't want to do anything, but he couldn't help himself. He suddenly stood up and took 2 steps towards Tamari. Both his knees spread wide as he put her in between and hovered above her. He could feel her breath. She was nervous, not afraid. He could also hear the sound of her heartbeat. It was perhaps her first time being in this situation. It was of course a bit frightening. She didn't say anything though. He smiled. Naruto leaned closer and placed both his hands around her waist. She flinched slightly, but he stopped moving and offered her a reassuring smile. He still didn't say a word to her. She seemed to relax under his smile. His hand slipped through her shirt. She was tense, but her body felt warm, her skin was soft. He moved closer to her face. Her hands, which had been on her bust, melted to the side. Her eyes were staring at him with mixture emotions. But beneath all those emotions, there was the excitement. She didn't hate him. She didn't want him to get off her. This wasn't wrong. And so, he brushed his lips against hers for a second before his tongue slipped out. He licked her lips for a moment. They were soft. He captured her lips and slowly started to kiss her. He watched her eyes close. And he followed her. As the gentle kiss deepened, her felt her tension ease, her hands moving up behind him. Naruto's hands slowly caressed the side of her chest as they moved up. They snaked between the clothing and touched her breasts. She stopped the kiss and broke away. She looked flustered, her breathing a bit heavy. She was watching him. Her eyes were searching for something. She searched for a whole minute of silence. Don't do anything you don't want to do, Naruto said in a whisper. She nodded her head not once but twice. Naruto figured the first nod was in agreement with his words and the second was permission, the permission to continue. He smiled. He didn't want to force himself upon her. He didn't want to use other means to be united with her. She was perfect, operating on her free will. He wanted her that way. Naruto took off his shirt and moved away from Tamari before helping her undress. He was sitting on her once more. She was truly flustered. Her hands pulled him closer. She was hugging him. There was enjoyable warmth. Perhaps she didn't want him to stare at her breasts. Naruto licked Tamari on the right side of her face while moving towards the mouth. Once more, he captured her lips. He did not devour her like a starved dog. He was gentle. And slowly her hold on him loosened. While still kissing her, Naruto's hands moved towards her breasts. He gently captured them both. Soft round comforts. They made him excited. He stopped kissing her and let go of her right boob. His tongue played around her nipple for a moment before he sucked it. Tamari let loose of a low moan. Naruto's right hand moved towards the space between Tamari's thighs. When his fingers reached at the entrance, she tensed slightly. He whispered something for her to relax and she did. And Naruto dies of happiness and the story ends. Chapter 10, The Emperor, Revenge and Death. Tamari stopped by the large village gates. She already had her fan strapped behind her. The lonesome journey towards the sand loomed large. She had accomplished her mission of coming here, and perhaps gained more than what she had expected. She certainly hadn't thought she would end up seeing Naruto and let alone end up getting closer to him as she did. It was amazing just what a couple of days could achieve when you open yourself to someone. Perhaps it was a rare thing for Naruto to do, but Tamari had enjoyed him. She had enjoyed his comfort, every part of him. The thought made her blush. You're not thinking something naughty, are you? Naruto asked with a wide smile on his lips. Tamari shook her head. She wasn't denying what Naruto had said but trying to clear her thoughts. "You're not getting into my head," she said a bit quickly. "I wasn't trying to," Naruto said. "Just curious seeing you blush suddenly when absorbed in your thoughts." Tamari didn't indulge Naruto by responding to him. He was teasing her again, trying to make her feel flustered. She wasn't going to fall for it. She still needed to get used to this. The situation was still a bit confusing. She didn't know what she was going to call him. She didn't know if she was in a relationship with him. She couldn't tell, and she didn't know how she could even bring up the subject with Naruto. "You can't really leave with me?" Tamari asked with emotion. "You don't have to reach Suna, you know." She offered him a smile. She really did want to spend some more time with him. "I can't," Naruto said with a shake of his head. "I'm not allowed to leave this village. I'm currently a flight risk, you see. Even now, I have got Anbu watching me," he said. Tamari frowned. He hadn't said anything about this before. She hadn't even realized it. It had to do with the situation in Uzushio. She really wished they had come to talk about it, but there was not enough time. She had to go home. "Doesn't that make you angry? You are being constantly watched." Naruto shook his head. "Annoying, yes, but angry? No." Naruto responded in a calm tone. "It is a bit true that I'm a flight risk, but that isn't the most important thing. I really wish I could travel with you, but I'm tied to this village." Tamari nodded and went silent. She looked down for a moment before looking back at Naruto, cheeks with a shade of pink. "When will I be able to see you again?" she said a bit too quickly. Naruto was amused by the way she spoke. It annoyed Tamari. She quickly got over her embarrassment and glared at him with a threatening look. Naruto laughed while holding up both his hands. "I don't know, Tamari. But I will surely miss you. When I can, I will come to you if you can't come to me. We will talk then." "I hope it isn't after many months like last time," Tamari said. Naruto smiled, but didn't offer a response. He pulled her into a hug and whispered into her ear. "Have a safe journey, Tamari. Don't worry about anything along the way, although I won't be with you, someone will protect you along the way." Tamari stared at him curiously before asking. "Was someone also watching me last time?" Naruto just smiled and twirled the blonde around before pushing her away. "I will be thinking about you when I visit the bar tonight," he said with a laugh. When Tamari twisted around with a glare, he smiled. "Just messing with you." She stared at him for a moment but really didn't seem to believe him even though she nodded. She turned away and waved her hand before walking away from the village gates. Naruto watched her leave before he turned away, hands inside his pockets. He hoped that Danzo didn't try anything. Perhaps he would be too preoccupied with his efforts to escape from the village to do anything. Then again, Sasuke had done a great number on his forces, so he was unlikely to do anything dangerous at this point. "Looks like you're doing well," Jiraiya said as he appeared beside Naruto, his eyes facing the direction Tamari had disappeared off to. "We need to talk," he said in a hardened tone. "It sounds serious," Naruto responded in a calm tone, feeling the seriousness coming from the Sannin. The man almost never used such a tone when talking to him. He could use it, but it was never really directed towards him. This was perhaps going to be troublesome. But Naruto didn't need to prepare for anything. He was always ready for anything. Besides, after that conversation with Tsunade, he was expecting things to get heated up. "It is," Jiraiya said with a nod of his head. He placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder and they disappeared in a swirl of leaves. They appeared atop of the wall that surrounded the village. The Sannin sat down while casting a narrowed glance towards the silent Naruto, who was staring down at the village with a look of indifference. "What is this about? Did you ever go to Uzushio Gakure with the Sandaime?" Jiraiya asked, in the same tone he had been using when he started. His eyes were narrowed, never leaving Naruto. The blonde turned to face the Sannin with nothing but a raised eyebrow. That was about the only reaction he could give the Sannin. He had gone to Uzushio with the Sandaime Hokage, but he wasn't going to tell that to Jiraiya. It was nevertheless something that this person wasn't supposed to know. Then again, if he was asking, he didn't know anything but merely working on suspicions. "I cannot answer that." "Can't or won't?" "Doesn't matter either way," Naruto said with a shrug. "There are a couple of things that I did with the old man and he told me never to tell anyone. Whatever you say or have in mind, I'm not going to answer that question if it's something that I told the old man that I would not tell anyone. The old man didn't tell his secrets, and he was going to do the same. It was only fair and perhaps it was now convenient." Jiraiya narrowed his eyes dangerously. "I'll assume that you went to Uzushio Gakure, but what did you see in the village? Was it revived when you went there?" He demanded answers from Naruto. I care for you, Naruto, and I don't want to suspect you of anything, but if you refuse to answer questions, this village will have no choice but to use force to get you to answer the questions. It is no longer just about you, but the very security of this village is under threat. And that is where we draw the line, huh? Naruto said silently. Regardless of what you think or believe, I cannot answer that question, sensei. If you think using force is the only way you can get answers from me, you are free to do so. I won't fight you. I have no desire to do so. However, I still won't willingly give out any information. Jiraiya frowned. Even if that information could help us protect the hidden leaf? Protect it from what? Uzushio Gakure? Naruto was silent for a moment. He suppressed the urge to snort. Uzushio Gakure has no reason to threaten Konoha. Perhaps if you are assuming I am also a threat to Konoha, then I can understand. I do have all the reasons you can have to see the people of this village destroyed and suffering after what they put me through. He shook his head. But there is no such desire in me. I don't really like holding on to hatred. I am already miserable, I'd rather not make things worse. Are you saying that Uzu isn't a threat to Konoha? That isn't my conclusion to make, Naruto said calmly. What did you do when you got to Omigakure, sensei? It appears that the wheels have suddenly come off just after you returned. I am curious. Nothing, but I am worried that Nagato might bring destruction, Jiraiya said in a firm tone. At this stage, I can't tell what you will do, and that worries me. He paused. What did you say to him when we went to Omigakure? You had some time with him before I came to the tower with Konan. Naruto adopted a thoughtful look on his face before shrugging carelessly. Just greeted a fellow Uzumaki, but nothing much was said. Perhaps he may have said something about the fact that both of us were trained by you. The blonde said. If you are not going to take me to Anbu Chambers to force information out of me, I have a date with Ramen, sensei. If you decide to come for me while there, just wait till I'm done eating. I would rather not have to fight over my spoiled meal. He jumped off the wall, leaving Jiraiya alone after saying those words. Jiraiya sighed. Well, he hadn't expected Naruto to leak anything. Even so, it hadn't gone exactly as he had imagined. Naruto was still impossible to read, and his nonchalance about the whole issue made things worse. He was certain now that Naruto had gone to Uzushio before. And he was perhaps familiar with the village. Even if he wasn't familiar with it, he had some connection with it. At this stage, if Nagato was connected to Uzu, then it was possible that both Nagato and Naruto were familiar with each other, and that represented a depressing possibility. What Naruto could do, then Nagato could do. Kumagakure. Yugito stepped into the Raikage's office with calmness about her, but she was really nervous about why she was being called today. She was almost certain that it had nothing to do with a mission she recently did. This had to be something serious, and it bothered her. It hadn't been one of the messengers who came to her, but one of the Black Corps who came. It was usually something serious, and she really hoped she wasn't in any serious trouble. She hadn't done anything wrong, but in the shinobi world, you could never know. You wish to see me, Raikage-sama? Yugito said to A. The Yondaime Raikage was sitting behind his desk with Mabui standing beside him. A nodded his head and looked up to her. Months ago, you had a sparring session with a certain Uzumaki, he said. Yugito nodded her head. She hadn't said anything about it because she hadn't felt it was important. She hadn't even been asked of it. She knew he was Uzumaki, and the village seemed to have a problem with the Uzumaki, but Naruto hadn't seemed like a bad person. He was actually a very delightful young man. Yes. Naruto, she said. You remember him well. The Yondaime Raikage noted with a stare. Well, he does leave an impression on you, she said with a slight shrug of her shoulders. Besides, he is another Jinchuriki, so you really can't forget that. He wasn't like a normal shinobi who she could forget after meeting in battle. He had proved to be strong even, so he was someone to remember. I nodded. We have a problem with the Uzumaki clan, and very soon, you might have to face him. Tell me about his skills, he said. Yugito nodded her head and did so. I'm going to send shinobi to bring him here, by force if necessary. If something happens, I can always put the blame on Konoha. You will observe from a good distance along with C. It is likely that they will fail. When that happens, come report to me and I will make my demands to Konoha. Regardless of what happens, you are not to interfere, is that understood? Hi, Raikage-sama. Hidden Leaf, Uchiha Compound. Sasuke's eyes flashed coldly when Naruto walked towards him in his little training ground. He hated the fact that the blonde could just walk into his compound just like that. The blonde was standing in front of him, an amused expression on his face. It did nothing but make him scowl and feel the urge to attack him, but he stopped remembering their last battle. Well, He wanted to test things now. He was not the same person as before, yet this was not the time. He was preparing himself to face Danzo. What a nasty look, Naruto stated in a calm tone. Are you still angry that I chopped off your wings when we last met in battle? He asked with his head tilted to the side. Sasuke glared murderously, but Naruto's amusement only seemed to return. He clenched his fists and then responded. What do you want from me, Naruto? I have actually been watching you since you returned, Naruto said calmly. Your activities with Danzo. It has been a curious thing to see. I guess Itachi could not completely wipe out that hatred within you. Regardless, I know that Danzo is planning to flee the village and you are going to attack him, with the blessing of Tsunade, of course, he said. Sasuke narrowed his eyes dangerously. How do you know that? Naruto merely shrugged indifferently. That isn't the important part. I already know, you can't change it. What you should be asking me is why I am telling you this, he said. When Sasuke just stared at him, he spoke again. I'm actually getting bored in this village, and so I'm going to join you. You will fight Danzo.